follow-up?
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Next, we will go to Matt Misterek from the News Tribune.
Yeah, thanks. Good morning. I have a question regarding the state auditor's Excellion data breach. A member of the House Republican caucus, Representative Jesse Young, is saying in no uncertain terms that this breach is another gross failure by the Employment Security Department. He places blame on Susie Levine and Governor Inslee. Young is a high-tech consultant. He says he knows a lot about these things, but the auditor's office has reiterated that this incident had nothing to do with ESD. So what's leadership's take on this and where the culpability resides?
Well,
I can go ahead, JT.
Okay. We were briefed by the state auditor yesterday morning, just a tiny bit ahead of the information becoming public. And I thought that she did a good job of talking about how it happened and taking a fair amount of the responsibility. She did point out that it was a third-party vendor. Representative Benke and Senator Rivers can talk a little bit about things that we should have done and should be doing in the future so that we're not at the mercy of third-party vendors. The information came from ESD, but it came to the auditor's agency as a part of an audit, and actually I think was part of kind of a test stream. So that's the way that I understand it happened. I think most people here know I'm anything but a computer expert. That's the part that I know. And you asked for a leadership perspective on details. I'd be more than happy to defer to Matt or to Ann.
And I would add on the technical side, JT, you're exactly right. It was about a file transfer protocol. If you want to get geeky, I can get more than that, but it's during an actual test when they're doing an upgrade of transferring of files that there was potentially a man in the middle. We don't know specifically where it was intrusive within that structure. I teach some of this currently and have dealt with a lot of this throughout the last 30 years of being with the U.S. Army Cyber Command and other things that we've seen across the international spectrum of increases to our data intrusion and breaches across our networks, from multinational organizations to the Nigerian cyber ring to others. So it's a matter of really, they could have been in there before, they could have been held kind of silent in surveillance or reconnaissance mode, and then they were just discussing when's a good time to attack, and then they executed it around Christmas time. So yeah, we can get more into details if you want on some of that as well.
And I would add, I've not spoken with Representative Young, but his point is well taken. But for the mismanagement at ESD, we wouldn't even be having this discussion. So, maybe there's some piece of that in there that he's referring to.
Did you have a follow-up?
I guess I'm fine. Yeah, I just was curious what the overall reaction was to Representative Young's statement, which really largely doesn't even talk about the auditor's office. It pretty much focuses on ESD. But I'm fine, thank you.
Next, we will go to Melissa Santos from Crosscut. Are you there, Melissa? Okay, we will move on to Sarah Gensler from McClatchy.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I would like to hear from Representative Benke just specifically what the legislature's role might be in addressing this. I hear sort of this breach drawing attention to the importance of generally cybersecurity, but is there something that the legislature might do specifically to address what was at play in this specific breach?
No, and thank you for that question. Senator Rivers and I were kind of talking about overall strategy and then into the details. So I'll give her the credit to do the overall one, and I'll go ahead and focus on, we're looking at specific operations where what personal data should be stored in what agencies and for how long. For example, one of the operations we're looking at is why do we still continue to have full Social Security numbers in locations around the state agencies when we can identify those by other means? What about identifying different areas of what a definition of personal information should be? And then how long should that be in accounts with different areas within this? Where should we house our audit critical data that could be classified as a little bit more than public agencies, like, for example, audits and things that are going on with that? And I'll hand it over to Senator Rivers about the strategic plans that we're looking at.
I think we also have to be looking at the resources that are needed by the OCIO or the Office of the Chief Information Officer to be sure that they are providing they can provide the protections that we need as a citizenry. The other thing is that we're working with systems that are very, very old in our state. It's not just us. It's the community college system. It's other agencies that are working with aged systems that are just ripe for the picking. And so for us, I think we have to make a call about, are we going to be penny wise and pound foolish in terms of where we allocate resources to make sure that we protect our citizens' data as if it were being kept in Fort Knox rather than in, Mayberry RFD.
Sarah, did you have a follow-up question?
Not right now, thank you.
Okay. Next, we will go to Joe Sullivan of the Seattle Times.
Hi, question for Senators Holy or Rivers, since I believe you're both on the Senate Healthcare Committees. As budget writers look to address the many years-long underfunding of the public health system, I'm just curious to get broadly your thoughts about what the legislature should be doing, both dollar-wise and policy-wise, to bring the state and local public health districts up to speed.
Jeff, would you like to, or do you want me to take that?
You start, I'll follow.
Okay, great. So, Joe, you might remember that when I was the chair of Senate Healthcare, that I had a fully funding foundational public health bill that we funded in the Senate budget, but when it went over to the House, it got gutted. So it's very clear that we could have used that to make sure that we had adequate PPE and other necessities during the COVID. The only thing that we know for sure is another disaster's coming, and we know for sure that we cannot weather it the way that we weathered this. So we need to be better prepared. And I feel like the taxes that have been proposed to pay for this are very, very regressive. A sugar tax, which hits and soft drink, the beverage tax, which hits those who are already economically struggling the hardest. A healthcare tax, which of course hits those who can barely afford insurance as it is the hardest. So I think what we have to do is say to ourselves, is this a priority? We're sitting on $5 billion right now. It seems to me that a wise use of that resource is to fully fund foundational public health.
I'm going to follow up. That is a great lead-in, talking about priorities of government, Senator Rivers. We always talk about infrastructure and roads, and then you have K-12 education, which pretty much has taken a life of its own with McCleary. You have public safety, which everybody demands that be adequately funded. But the third leg to that stool are the most vulnerable, and that's exactly what we're talking about here. Quite frankly, we've had vehicles this is my 9th year in the legislature. We've had vehicles over the years that we've attempted to use to adequately fund. Say, for example, 2013, when I first came to the legislature, we had about a $38 billion operating budget. We're pushing past $58 billion at this point. And quite frankly, with those kind of massive increases, it's funny how there's always seems to be a tax increase or some tailor attached to providing programs like this that really are fundamentals of government. So yes, we made the attempt. Senator Rivers covered that, and that's not the first time. That is one of a series of attempts, and that have been unsuccessful doing so as something standalone that we should have funded when we had huge bandwidth and able to do so over the last 8 years here.
And I'll just add, from a House standpoint, again, we hear over and over when the majority stands up to defend their budget that budgets are about priorities. And Senator Rivers mentioned that as well. Budgets are about priorities. We agree. Democrats have controlled the governor's mansion since the day I was born. If public health is underfunded, why, whose fault is that? When the Republicans control the state Senate, they made public health a priority. When Democrats come out with budgets out of the House and out of the Senate, they don't make it a priority. We have 4% annual revenue growth through the pandemic, and the budget overall has grown by about 80% since the governor was elected. If we can't find it within ourselves to fund foundational public health in the midst of all that revenue growth, then is it really a priority for the people writing the budgets? I know it is for our caucus and the Senate Republican caucus, and I think you'll continue to see that throughout session. But saying that we can only fund it if we have new taxes on soft drinks or health insurance, that's not a priority. That's just a money grab.
Right.
Oh, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, a follow-up for any of the three of you. Then setting taxes aside, I believe at least the healthcare assessment proposal would put $150 million a year toward public health. Is that the ballpark size of investment you think the state needs to make?
No, in 2017, it was 178 million that I had requested and that we had booked. So this is, I think it's a nice starting place, but I don't think it really fully gets us there.
Okay. Melissa Santos from Crosscut emailed me her question, and that question is, how do leaders think the legislature should be preparing for the end of the eviction ban? Is the plan that cleared the House and is expected to clear the Senate next week adequate to address the cliff people are facing?
Well, I'll start off and then hand off to someone who's a little more deeply involved in it than I am. But, first of all, we've got people in the legislature that are, I think, deeply immersed in this and understand the policy from a variety of perspectives and often have worked together pretty well. You've got a problem that involves keeping people in their homes. And I have talked to a lot of people that provide housing over the years. I have never found a single one of them that are anxious to get people out of their properties. Their goal is to keep people in. But the longer this eviction moratorium goes on and the longer that it enables a small proportion of people to abuse it, the harder it's going to be to unwind this. So we have to do, I think, a pretty sophisticated job of unwinding the ban and at the same time providing housing assistance for those who truly need it that will get to the owners of the housing so that they will be able to continue to provide housing because we've known that we've had a housing problem for decades. Probably, and it's certainly been at the top of the agenda for the legislature for several years now. And what we are doing right now is likely going to make that shortage worse in the future. In our caucus, we have two highly qualified people that have been around this for a while, Andrew Barkas and Jeremy Dufault, who are both working on this, and they're working hand in hand with Representative Stokesbury. So I'm going to exercise the prerogative of a caucus leader and ask someone who knows more about it to provide a better answer.
Well, I'll just add in response to Melissa's question. I mean, Representative Wilcox is right. Andrew Barkas has a bill that would phase out the eviction moratorium, but also spend $600 million out of the state's rainy day fund to help with back rent. Representative Dufault has a bill that would create a voucher program and provide $300 million from the state's rainy day fund. I had a bill that would have provided $600 million in rental assistance between state and federal sources. None of those bills have gotten hearings. Yesterday, the House Democrats rejected $300 million of rental assistance out of the state's rainy day fund. Again, every House Democrat voted against that except for 3. And that wouldn't have even changed the eviction moratorium. It would have just been extra money for rental assistance in the pockets of tenants impacted by COVID. That was rejected. The Democrats' plan uses federal money and a whopping $30 million of more flexible funds that they're choosing to use. So on the one hand, Republicans are proposing $300 to $600 million. Democrats are proposing basically 30.
Next, we will go to Austin Jenkins.
Thank you. This is a question about a bill that perhaps many of you have not heard about, but there's a hearing today on a proposal from Senator Darneal to establish a joint legislative task force on jail standards. And I've reported pretty extensively on the condition of jails, county jails around the state, and also on the issue of jail deaths. And one of the things that emerged in that is that the state really hasn't put money into modernizing or building jails in several decades. We also know that jail deaths are kind of the tip of the iceberg in terms of problems that are happening with inside jails in these old buildings. So I'm just curious if there's interest on the part of Republicans in addressing the plight of local jails in the state and the appetite for creating some task force to try to dig into this issue.
Well, Austin, I think you might have stumped us. None of us have heard of that bill. I mean, I not having seen the bill or read the bill or not being in the hearing, I would say that I suspect we all care about making sure that jails are safe. And they are, and that we are treating whoever's incarcerated there with respect and dignity. And so I don't, the idea that the state would study that or be to appoint a task force to study it does not seem all that controversial to me. Now, if at the same time you said this was a Senator Darneal bill, Senator Darneal has a penchant for letting folks out of jail. I'm not sure we always agree with her on that. There's certainly cases where that might be the right answer, but so if this is truly about the living conditions, about the health and safety of inmates, absolutely, we should make sure we're doing a good job and that the counties are doing a good job. If it's about just setting the stage for once again loosening our state's laws in favor of folks who have violated law over law-abiding citizens, we probably have some disagreements.
Okay, could Senator Holy maybe address this? Because I know you're from the Spokane area where there's been a lot of concerns about that jail.
There has been. Actually, the concerns aren't about the jail. It's about the holding detention center Spokane County uses at Geiger. It's a World War II barracks that has been repurposed and having to have upgrades over a period of decades now that is past its prime. They've attempted to float financing in Spokane County over the last 10 years, if not longer, for a new jail, and it doesn't quite seem to get traction. There's so many different intervening things in play with Spokane County in particular, having to do with the possible renting of jail space with adjacent counties, rather than the cost of building something, the ability to renovate or expand what we currently have. And also the other side of the coin has to do with the criminal justice system, talking about attempting to reduce the need for jail or find other home confinement options here, other SOSA or DOSA, drug or sexual offender sentencing options other than specific hard time. There's a real conflict with this in Spokane County that hasn't seemed to be resolved yet.
And I would add, Austin, that this is something that is typically reserved to the county governments to manage. And even if we were to bond for them in the capital budget, it still requires some revenue source from the county. And so the locals end up being truly in charge. And I know this because I did a jail campaign up in Colletts County once, a long time ago. And the locals, they feel like they have an idea of what jail is and that it's supposed to be punishment. So this is one of those times where we really have to work closely and respect the separation of governmental authority. But I'd be in support of the task force. I just, if we're going to force more unfunded mandates that ultimately work against counties being able to afford new jails, then, or release people who have done bad things, then I don't think that passes muster either. So.
All right, next we'll go to Jerry Cornfield of the Herald.
This question's for Senator Braun. Senator, I wondered if you could talk a little bit about what the your caucus strategy will be on the COVID package. You probably are aware of what happened in the House, mostly partisan vote, a number of amendments. One did make it, most were rejected. So I'm wondering if your caucus will try some of those similar amendments, and whether you've been in conversation with the majority party about maybe changes to that bill that you guys would like to see.
Sure. So we have actually been in conversation with Senate Democrats since early in the session about what's been termed the early action bill package. And while we're not in complete agreement on all of those bills, many of them we are in agreement, and they're passing on bipartisan lines. I think on the bill you're talking about, they have accepted some of our concerns. Well, first of all, there's a lot we just agree on in that bill. There's some things where we agreed on the spending, but we were concerned about how it be implemented, and they have been receptive to our suggestions on how you improve the language to make sure the money actually gets out there and does the things you intend for it to do. There's still a couple remaining things that I think will be concerns in our caucus, but I expect, and that doesn't mean we won't attempt to improve it, which is how I see the efforts of the House Republicans, is they saw a bill that did some good things, but could do more good things more quickly for the people of the state of Washington, and they tried to make that happen. So I don't disagree with that effort. That doesn't, I think, preclude us from supporting the underlying bill.
You have a follow-up, Jerry?
Yeah, I just want to clarify first something you just said. It sounds like the version that will move out of the Senate might be changed from how it's arriving from the House. Is that your sense? And that it would then go back to the House? Or do you think, because they are trying to keep it clean and move it straight through? So, and then secondly, just like follow up on the eviction moratorium issue, is either caucus looking to add some income requirements or any kind of standards for renters to demonstrate they have a COVID need?
So I believe, and we're actually, now that the bill's come over from the House and we have it in that form, we're going back and checking, but we believe a number of our concerns that we discussed, 2 or 3 weeks ago with the Senate majority got incorporated into the bill early on. So I think that doesn't necessarily mean we need to change in the Senate, but we've been kind of waiting to see what actually came over. We got a little bit of work to do to make sure that our concerns were addressed, or if they weren't, then we'll have to decide how to handle that. But I think the majority's preference is to send it out clean. We're going to weigh it on its merits and offer amendments as we think appropriate, and we'll see what happens from there. I'm not going to commit to sending it clean or commit to changing it. We got to study the bill just like the legislative process envisions, and then make our recommendations accordingly. On the housing, you ask a very specific question about whether we should include means testing. I'm as JT mentioned, I'm not as deep into this issue as some of our other members who are not on this call. But typically, as you roll this money out to make sure that renters who are truly at risk due to the coronavirus and other issues, and landlords who are truly at risk due to the moratorium are helped in a meaningful way. And I think it's reasonable that you do some means testing, that people aren't just taking advantage of the system while they have the opportunity, that we're really focused on helping the people that need help. So whether that means we need to add means testing, I can't tell you, not having studied that bill in detail, but I think that's something philosophically we would be supportive of.
Hey, Jerry, let me jump in on this too. And I appreciate the fact that you were watching that last night. I thought it was the debate on the amendments was outstanding. And, it's an example of Drew and his collaborators really trying hard to present the ideas that they knew Democrats have favored in the past, and showing that here are 5 very large and specific areas of agreement. The rejection, I think, colored the debate on final passage, maybe in an unfortunate way, because the bill does do a fair amount of good. It is true that there's a sense of urgency in moving it through the process. But again, I thought that a lot of the House Republicans made a great point. And it's been echoed by some editorial boards recently, I think in particular the Tacoma News Tribune, where we pointed out that if circumstances would have been a little bit different, some or all of this could have been done quite a bit earlier. And so we're all sympathetic to the sense of urgency. We just wish that we could have had the commonality and the sense of purpose that would have meant it doesn't matter whose bill it is. Let's just try to help people when it comes to housing, education, and a whole bunch of other things that are basic to people in an emergency.
All right, next we will go to Jeff Pogula of Como.
Yes, I'm going to shift topics a little bit. I want to get some reaction on a couple of things. First, I want to speak with Matt Banky, who represents my old stomping grounds in the Tri-Cities. I wanted to get your reaction to what we saw over the weekend with this group of anti-mask protesters that were going from store to store. Keeper reported it, our sister station down there. We had it up here. It seemed to get a lot of traction on our website, a lot of interest. What's your reaction to some of those activities?
Well, like anything, we want to condemn any kind of violence in our streets. We want to make sure we have safety across our citizens, our communities. Our big thing is to ensure we support our law enforcement and the agencies around here. I have a really good friend in the chief of police here in Kennewick and Richland, and got to know the new one in Pasco really well over the last couple of years. And I think what they're doing right now is bringing people together. And that's our key during this time in the nation as well as the state, and ensuring that all voices are being heard and that people have an outlet to ensure that their voice is being heard in a systematic, procedural, and recognizing their constitutional rights in the best manner we possibly can. I know it's unfortunate. People need to protest and they want to go ahead and have that voice, and we support peaceful protests within our communities. But when it gets turned into violence, that's where we need to ensure that we have safety within our streets and our communities.
And then as a follow-up to anyone who wanted to take this, we're also seeing, based on reporting from Jim Brunner over at the Times, that the 3 Republicans in the Washington congressional delegation are asking the Biden administration to reconsider the nomination of Susie Levine. There was a lot of talk earlier in the presser here about the troubles and that. I just wanted to get your guys' reaction.
Well, I think they're right. We should value competence in government. It's not all about ideology. It's not always all about elections. It should be about pure competency, and to the extent that it's possible, it should be a meritocracy when it comes to how do we select the people that do the most important things for the people of Washington and now the people of the United States. And clearly, performance in our state ESD has not qualified the person at the head of that to be in charge of it nationally.
And I'd like to add to that I'm really uncomfortable that decision was made before the results of the audit came out. I think that will be very key. The results of the audit would be very key to any employer who would consider bringing someone in for such an important job.
And once again, the fact that she still had a job for months and then got a promotion just confirms everything that the public thinks is wrong with government, that there's no accountability, that it's an insider's club. It's funded by, it's driven by political donors and a revolving door. The folks on this call go home to our districts and try to convince our government skeptic constituents that no, government really can do a lot of good, but it makes our job harder when there's no accountability in public life. And Susie Levine should have resigned. When she didn't resign, the governor should have fired her. And Joe Biden shouldn't give her a promotion. It's that simple.
Well, and the best question would be, why wasn't that letter bipartisan?
All right, next we will go to Hannah Scott.
Hi. This is really for anybody. I wanted to get your take on some of the education bills. I know Senator Hawkins has the pilot program for year-round school that I think everybody pretty much supports. I wanted to see if there was anyone on the panel that had thoughts about Senator Hunt's bill that would be for the year of bridge, the pilot program for a bridge year. And then did any of you have a chance to see the stabilization funding bill that was dropped by Representative Dolan today?
I saw the bill was dropped. I did not read it.
Yeah.
Well, Hannah, again, not having read that bill, but what I can point you back to was our debate on the House floor last night. Congress sent something $800 and something million to the states as part of their December stimulus package to send to schools. They allowed up to 10% of that to be retained by the state education agency. A bill I introduced proposed giving every single last dollar directly to schools as long as they had a reopening plan and then actually reopened. The Democrats' plan involved only giving 90% of that money to schools, and they at least required a reopening plan, but not anything more than that. So on the House floor last night, we had two amendments. One would have given districts all of the money rather than 90% of it, and required them to reopen as a condition to get the last round of money. Would have been around $150, $160 million extra to K-12. That was rejected by Democrats. There was a separate amendment that would have sent $340 million to districts to help address the learning loss that's occurred during remote learning, as we've seen kids' academic achievement be stunted, the opportunity gap widen between wealthy and poor children. This is actually a plan of the governor's that was part of his proposal, probably the best idea he had in his entire budget. The only flaw is that the money isn't driven out soon enough. Waiting until the budget that passes on the last day of session won't give districts the certainty to plan summer school, much less the ability to offer after-school programs as they begin to open up in the spring. So I think that money should have been driven out right away, but for some reason Democrats disagreed and are continuing to force our schools to remain in limbo with regard to programs to address the learning loss, and aren't willing to offer stronger incentives to help them open up when the science is very clear that they can't open up safely today.
Anna, did you have a follow-up?
I did really quick, just wanted to gauge the panel to see, I know everyone's working remotely, but did you happen to catch everything that happened down in Olympia at the Governor Hotel this weekend? Specifically the fact that this was largely motivated by the homeless situation and a lack of progress in that city and county, but also criticisms at the state level as well. Anything that is going to be done for homeless this session?
Well, I would, I hate to keep giving the same answer, but long discussion last night on amendments having to do with, attempts to put more money into putting more people into housing. I thought you saw Drew and his collaborators. Andrew Barkas was part of this as well. Kelly Chambers try to really strengthen the efforts by hundreds of millions of dollars that the state of Washington is putting into keeping people in homes and providing more housing dollars. We'll keep trying that. It was a surprise to see so many on the other side not interested in that effort. But man, what a large effort that was fairly early in the session by Republicans.
Hannah, last session, I had a bill that would have created a 0.25% local sales tax option to fund homelessness. Was told by cities and other advocates that funding through sales tax is too regressive and that wouldn't be a winning policy in their mind. So the bill didn't really go anywhere. Well, lo and behold, because the Democrats couldn't come up with any other funding, King County decided over the interim to raise their sales tax anyway to fund homelessness services. So this year I'm introducing a similar version of the bill, but removing the sales tax option part on the locals and making it entirely creditable against the state's portion. So it's sort of structured as a sales tax because it's based off the amount of sales activity, but there's no net impact to the taxpayer. Instead, it's only state dollars that will go to cities as long as they agree not to have safe injection sites and agree to keep camping at least 1,000 feet away from schools, parks, playgrounds, and courthouses. A couple very basic requirements that the vast majority of Washingtonians agree with. And if cities can agree to that, they would have the ability to get 1/8 of a cent back in sales tax collections that currently goes to the state. Would provide more money to cities than the governor includes in his plan. It's a bill that I just got the blue sheet for over the weekend, and we'll be introducing in the next couple days. And I think will be part of Republicans' conversations of priorities we would fund if we were in charge.
You know, I'd like to address this issue slightly off message. Homeless is an issue unto itself. However, what is it about the current environment that allows groups on both sides of the political spectrum, homeless, completely separate issue out there, become so emboldened or confident in what they're doing to move past addressing the legislature, protests, civil disobedience, and move right directly to criminal activity in bulk, in large groups. And we've seen this a lot in having to do with ideological positions here or compelling positions, as with the homeless. Nonetheless, they're moving beyond that which has historically, at least for the last 50 years, not been seen in such volume. And does this have something to do with the response or lack of response by public safety? It seems like sometimes bad behavior that goes unchecked or unaddressed emboldens people that engage in bad behavior, and they become more emboldened and extend further bad behavior. So I'm just wondering about the environment that we've allowed to happen or created here over the last couple of years that has given rise to these type of behaviors.
We've got time for one more question, and that goes to Michael Goldberg of Washington State Wire.
Thank you. If I could just ask Representative Stokesbury regarding the COVID relief package, which passed last night versus yours, responding to the increased revenue projection several months ago, you said it's undeniably positive news that the state's economic hole might not be as big as once thought, but that the volatility still shows how cautious that legislators need to be going forward. And I know Representative Ormsby cited caution and protecting against future uncertainty as the reason his COVID relief package doesn't use any rainy day funds. So as your proposal would have spent more, how are you thinking about sort of caution and protecting against future uncertainty at this moment?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. You know, it's strange to see Republicans ready to embrace some of the very programs that Democrats have spent years saying we need to fund, and Democrats have suddenly reject it and use Republican arguments to do so. It's interesting. I think the distinction has to do with money being spent this year versus money being obligated for the future. We have a rainy day fund with a nearly $2 billion balance that's designed for times just like this. As I said on the floor, you know, it's not just raining, it's pouring, and the legislature seems to be snoring. if now is not the time to tap into the rainy day fund, then when is? What is the purpose of it if it's not to use it at a time just like this? So I absolutely think that we need to be bold and be big with how we talk about using the rainy day fund to help us, to help stimulate and accelerate a permanent recovery. I think where caution is needed is in terms of the biennial budget with ongoing expenses, given how volatile future projections have been going out 4 to 6 years. That's where I would be very hesitant to write a budget that assumes a lot of new revenue coming in when we're not totally sure just how long the recovery will take and just how sharp its upward trajectory would be. I think it's perfectly consistent to advocate for being big and bold with our state savings right now to help accelerate that recovery, but also being cautious with how much we extend and commit the state going 2, 4, 6 years out into time.
Well, that's all the time we have today. I just want to thank everyone for joining us. We appreciate it, and we will connect with you again next Tuesday. Thank you.